The auctioneer raised Elias Hartwell's medicine chest, and the Duke's gloved hand closed over the hammer. The brass head struck Gideon Marlowe's palm instead of the polished block, silencing the crowded York shop. January rain rattled against the shutters, wet wool steamed beneath the tallow candles. Clara Hartwell stood 3 yards away, one hand crushing the seam of her black glove. The walnut chest rested between a cracked barometer and 6 volumes of sermons, its corners worn pale by her brother's hands, its warped lid breathing rosemary, camphor, and dried orange peel. "Remove your hand, sir," the auctioneer said, though his brows lifted when he recognized the tall man beneath the dripping black greatcoat. Gideon did not move. "This lot is withdrawn." "It is not yours to withdraw," Clara said. Heads turned. Gideon's gaze found her through the candle smoke. He was leaner than the portrait Elias had kept above his desk, his mouth harder, dark hair touched with silver, although the Duke of Wycliffe could not yet be 35. "Miss Hartwell. You know me, then. Your brother described you accurately." Clara stepped to the table. "Did he describe me as a woman who enjoys strangers interrupting the sale of her possessions?" "He described you as unlikely to accept assistance without first attempting to wound the person offering it." A few bidders hid smiles. Clara stopped opposite him, the chest between them like a small coffin. "My brother's creditors are entitled to payment." "They have been paid." "By whom?" Gideon drew a folded paper from his coat. Its wax seal bore a crowned wolf. "By me." The auctioneer inspected it, blanched, and cleared the room. When the last bidder departed, Clara faced Gideon across the empty shop. "You purchased my brother's debts as though they were a horse at Tattersall's." "I discharged them." "You also purchased the privilege of humiliating me before half of York." Candlelight traced the scar beneath his jaw. "That was not my intention." Men with titles rarely require intentions. Consequences arrive for them all the same. "Elias said you would be angry." "Elias has been dead for 4 months. Do not use him to make this intrusion sound tender." Rain drummed harder. Gideon touched the chest's tarnished latch. "Your brother came to Wycliffe last September because fever had entered the mining cottages. He treated 43 families while my steward argued that clean bedding cost too much. Elias wrote to me twice. I was in London. I answered neither letter quickly enough." Clara remembered Elias's last note, the writing weakening toward the edge of the page. He had described coughing children, smoke trapped in low cottages, and a duke who eventually opened the manor's empty rooms to the sick. He had never mentioned delayed letters. "The fever took him because he remained after every other practitioner left," Gideon continued. "He died on my land." From beneath his waistcoat he drew a dented brass compass. Clara recognized the gift she had given Elias on his 21st birthday. "He placed this in my hand before he lost consciousness. He asked me to see that you were protected." The compass swung between them. Clara heard Elias laughing in their father's apothecary shop, claiming the needle would always point toward trouble. "I require employment, not protection. I am offering both. Wycliffe Abbey has an infirmary closed for 11 years. The village needs it, and I require someone capable of directing it. You require a qualified surgeon apothecary. No man I approached will live 12 miles from the nearest assembly room. Elias wrote that you worked in your father's shop from childhood, prepared compounds, kept accounts, dressed wounds, assisted the midwife, and managed his dispensary whenever he rode out." Clara had done all of it, first beside her father and then beside Elias for 6 years. She possessed no license and never claimed to be a physician, but she could recognize a dangerous fever and knew when a patient required greater skill than hers. If she accepted the governess position awaiting her near Leeds, that knowledge would be reduced to treating scraped knees between French lessons. "What would my position be called?" "Superintendent of the Wycliffe Infirmary." He offered wages 3 times larger than the governess post and authority over provisions, servants, and daily operation, with serious cases sent to a qualified man in Alnwick. "I will not become your dependent," Clara said. You will be my employee. No allowance. No personal debts paid without my consent. No interference with treatments. And I will not be watched, followed, locked away, or treated as something my brother left in your keeping. Gideon closed his fingers around the compass. I promise to protect you. Then protect my right to refuse you. Are you refusing? Clara placed her hand on the cool walnut lid. She imagined Elias's bottles scattered through strangers' houses and his life reduced to unpaid sums in a clerk's hand. No. I am establishing the terms under which I accept. Gideon bowed, not as a duke acknowledging an inferior, but as one negotiator to another. My carriage leaves at 9 tomorrow. I will travel in my own hired chaise. The northern road is flooded in 3 places. Then your carriage may follow mine in case I require rescue. The scar beneath his jaw shifted. This time Clara realized he was suppressing a smile. The journey to Northumberland took 2 days and 1 night at a coaching inn smelling of onions, damp plaster, and old smoke. Clara traveled with Lady Miriam Marlowe, Gideon's silver-haired widowed aunt, while Gideon rode beside the carriage through rain. Whenever the road narrowed or a swollen stream crossed the ruts, he appeared at the window to inspect the horses, driver, sky, and Clara as though all 4 might collapse. Your nephew distrusts roads, Clara observed after his 3rd inspection. Lady Miriam bit into a sugared almond. Gideon distrusts anything he cannot command with a memorandum. I begin to understand why he needs a compass. He has carried it every day since Elias died. Clara watched him through rain-striped glass, his coat snapping in the wind. That does not make it his. No, Lady Miriam said. But guilt convinces men they own whatever punishes them. Wycliffe Abbey appeared at sunset, a long honey-colored house built around the remains of an ancient priory. A square bell tower rose above slate roofs silvered by rain. Beyond the western lawns, the land fell toward a dark sea. Salt sharpened the air, mingling with chimney smoke and pine. Gideon opened the carriage door himself. The stones are slippery. The left step is cracked. I possess eyes and feet. Clara's boot slid on the damaged step. Gideon caught her forearm, heat passing through 2 layers of wool, then released her as soon as she stood safely. The mason comes Thursday, he said. Inside, pointed arches and weathered stone saints framed an entrance hall smelling of beeswax and applewood. Mrs. Norwood, the housekeeper, curtsied with brass keys chiming at her waist. Gideon placed the ring in Clara's palm. The infirmary, still room, herb garden, linen cupboards, east gate, and your rooms. Every door I need. Every door connected to your work. You make freedom sound remarkably like a list of exclusions. Lady Miriam removed her gloves. Give her 3 days, Gideon. She will convert the gun room into a ward for coughing infants. Not the gun room. The light is poor. Clara glanced at him. He was serious. Her rooms occupied the former prioress's lodging. A coal fire warmed faded blue walls, the sheets smelled of lavender and starch, and the sea struck distant cliffs in slow hollow blows. Clara set Elias's chest beneath the window. Inside lay bottles, linen, scales, instruments, and packets labeled in his hurried hand. She touched the peppermint wrapper until the paper crumbled beneath her thumb. Gideon knocked and entered in evening clothes, wind still reddening his cheeks. Dinner is at 7. The western path collapses near the cliff. Do not use it. The east gate is locked after sunset. Is this conversation about dinner or imprisonment? Smugglers use the coast. Quarry shafts are poorly marked, and the tide cuts off the lower path. How fortunate women cannot read tides. Elias said you were reckless. Elias believed walking to market without an umbrella qualified as recklessness. Clara lifted the keys. A key may open a door or close one. Decide which purpose you intend these to serve. She placed them on the table. Gideon looked from the brass ring to her face. Keep them, he said. You begin tomorrow. The infirmary occupied 6 rooms along the southern court, each sealed beneath dust and 11 years of avoidance. When Clara opened the first shutter, cold sunlight sliced across gray shelves and set dust spinning. The room smelled of old vinegar, mouse droppings, damp plaster, and medicines long evaporated. A cracked basin stood beneath a rusted pump, 2 beds sagged against the wall, their ticking split and leaking straw. Mrs. Norwood pressed a handkerchief beneath her nose. Her late grace closed these rooms after the ague took 3 servants. Disease does not linger 11 years because a door remains shut, Clara said. Damp does. She pushed open another window, admitting sea air cold enough to sting her teeth. Burn the mattresses. Boil every sound sheet. Send for lime wash, strong soap, clean straw, carpenters, and a man to inspect the pump. His Grace approved £20. Then His Grace will learn what neglect costs. He learned before breakfast ended. Clara entered the morning room carrying a swollen ledger. Sunlight shone on the silver coffee pot and untouched kipper beside Gideon's hand. Lady Miriam fed crumbs to a one-eyed spaniel beneath the table. £36, Clara announced. Gideon lowered his letter. You were allotted 20. Your pump is corroded, the western roof leaks, and half the linen has mildew. Begin with 1 room. Illness does not queue according to the size of your allowance. Gideon inspected her figures. You replaced mahogany cabinets with pine. Bottles do not admire grain. You removed the silver instrument tray. Pewter can be scalded. You added £12 for cottage bedding. The fever began in damp beds last autumn. I will not treat people and return them to its cause. He looked up. That exceeds your authority. Then dismiss me. The room settled around the crackle of coal and the mantel clock. Gideon signed beneath her figures. £36. Provide receipts. I intended to provide results. Provide both. Over 3 weeks, the southern court changed. Hammers rang from morning until dusk. Limewash brightened the walls, clean linen snapped in the sea wind, and the still room filled with rosemary, mint, chamomile, comfrey, and willow bark. Villagers arrived first from curiosity, then from need. Clara treated a fisherman's split hand, a miner's coughing child, and an elderly tenant whose swollen thumb prevented him holding a spoon. She handled what she understood, refused what she did not, and sent dangerous cases to Alnwick with a note bearing Gideon's seal. Gideon appeared each day. He inspected the stove, windows, patient book, locks, and distance between candles and medicine shelves. The laudanum cupboard requires a second key, he said. Mrs. Norwood should hold it in case you are ill. Then I shall accuse you of surrendering control to the housekeeper. The event would require church bells. A faint laugh escaped him before he turned toward a latch. His protection extended beyond doors. A footman appeared whenever Clara walked toward the village. The gatekeeper recorded her departures. A groom followed when she gathered herbs. While purchasing honey from a tenant widow, Clara saw one of Gideon's men pretending to inspect a hedge containing nothing more dangerous than a thrush. She dismissed him. Another appeared before she reached home. That night she placed the key ring beside Gideon's dinner plate. Brass struck porcelain. Have I neglected the correct key? He asked. You have provided too many servants. Strangers have been reported near the coast. The stranger following me wore your livery beneath his coat. He was walking in the same direction. Backward. Lady Miriam raised her wineglass. Gideon cut his roast beef. You dismissed the first footman. He stood 3 feet away while Mrs. Barlow described a complaint involving the seat of her husband's trousers. Lady Miriam coughed into her napkin. Gideon's ears reddened. A greater distance could have been arranged. I arranged it. He returned to the house. You walked home alone along a road used by coal wagons. Clara leaned closer, candles warming the air with beeswax and gravy. I accepted a position, not a guard. Elias asked, do not place my brother at this table whenever you wish to end an argument. His knife stopped. He trusted me. Then behave as though he trusted my judgment as well. Clara stood. Keep the keys. They are useless when every open door has one of your servants behind it. She left through corridors where her footsteps returned from the stone arches. The next morning no footman waited outside. Clara walked to the village alone. At the bend near the chapel, she saw a mounted figure on the ridge almost a mile away. Gideon's bay stood black against the pale sky. Man and horse remained motionless until Clara entered the first cottage, then disappeared. She should have been furious. Instead, she spent the afternoon unable to forget the distance he had forced himself to keep. That night wind pushed against Clara's windows, making the leaded panes tremble. Shortly after midnight, she heard a door close and boots climb the tower stairs. Wrapped in a wool shawl, she followed. The bell chamber stood open to salt wind. One lamp burned beside a table of maps, its oil smoke mixing with wet stone and seaweed. Gideon stood in shirt-sleeves, both hands braced around a leather book. Elias's compass lay open beside it, its needle trembling. You will freeze, Clara said. He turned so sharply that his shoulder struck the bell rope. Bronze groaned above them. Return to your room. On the book's cover, written in Gideon's precise hand, were the words Miss Clara Hartwell. She reached for it. His palm came down over the leather. That is private. It bears my name. It contains household arrangements. Then you will not object to my reading them. He did object, but after the sea struck the cliffs below with a boom that traveled through the floor, he removed his hand. The first pages listed her wages, infirmary expenses, and York debts. Then came every servant assigned to accompany her, roads she used, tide tables, quarry shafts, gentlemen who had called at the abbey, and instructions for what should happen if Clara became ill, injured, stranded, insulted, abducted, impoverished, or widowed despite never having married. He had purchased a cottage in Bath under a solicitor's name and arranged an income for her if he died. He had written to medical men about headaches she had never discussed with him. Clara closed the book. You have made an inventory of every disaster that might befall me. I prefer preparation. You have written instructions for my life after your death. A prudent man settles such matters. A prudent man informs the woman whose future he has purchased. Gideon's face hardened. I purchased nothing. You purchased my debts, employment, cottage, guards, information, and enough contingencies to govern me from your grave. You did not bring me here to continue Elias's work. You brought me here to place me on a shelf and prove you kept your promise. That is not true. Then why do you know which road I take to Mrs. Barlow's cottage? A cart overturned there. Why ask whether my headaches are dangerous? You pressed your fingers to your temple at dinner. I had listened to you discuss drainage for an hour. His jaw flexed. You mock hazards because you do not understand how quickly an ordinary day becomes a man's last. Rain blew through the arch. Gideon's gaze shifted beyond her. Elias wrote that the cottages lacked bedding, he said. I read his first letter beside a London fireplace and placed it beneath invitations. The second arrived while I was at White's. I saw the word fever and told myself my steward would act. By the time I reached Wycliffe, Elias could not stand. He asked whether you would be safe. I said yes because it was the only answer I could give a dying man. Clara's throat tightened. He died because he treated the sick. He died because I treated his warning as an inconvenience. And now you treat me as the punishment. You are not a punishment. Then look at me without seeing a promise. He opened his mouth. Nothing came. Clara lifted the compass by its ribbon. The brass ached cold against her palm. Elias carried this through storms, bad roads, and cottages sensible men avoided. He never used it to remain still. You have turned his compass into a lock. Gideon's expression shifted as though the words had entered beneath his ribs. I lost him too, Clara said. I wake expecting his boots on the stair. But I will not arrange my life around the moment he died. I am not the final bottle from his chest, an account to settle, or evidence that you are honorable. Until you understand that, your protection is only another name for fear. She took her candle and descended, leaving the book, compass, and Duke alone with the wind. At breakfast Gideon's chair was empty. The coffee cooled in its silver pot while rain striped the windows. At 8, the entrance doors opened and Gideon crossed the hall wearing a riding coat and boots whitened by dried salt. A shallow cut marked one knuckle. The school roof at Calder's End collapsed during the night, he said. No one was inside, but a mason's apprentice injured his shoulder. The nearest surgeon is 30 miles south. Clara set down her cup. Then why are you still standing here? The road followed the coast for 6 miles before turning inland between low stone walls. Gideon drove a high-wheeled curricle because the heavier carriage could not cross the flooded lower road. Wind tore at Clara's bonnet ribbons, carrying rain and the sharp mineral tang of the sea. You could have sent a servant, she said. You told me to look at you without seeing a promise. This is your solution. I am attempting to look at your work. And what do you see? A woman whose bonnet is preparing to enter Scotland without her. Clara caught the ribbon as it whipped across her mouth. That was nearly amusing. Do not spread the rumor. At Calder's End, the school roof had fallen across benches and a slate board. Wet plaster lay in white clumps, the room smelled of soaked timber, chalk, and peat smoke. The apprentice sat against the wall with his arm in a grainsack sling. Clara examined him while Gideon knelt in mud to hold a lantern. The boy could move his fingers, and the shoulder showed no deformity. Rest the arm, Clara said. Cool cloths today, warm ones after tomorrow. Send for me if the hand becomes numb. He cannot return to the yard this week. The boy's face fell. My mother needs the wage. Gideon looked at him. Your wage continues until Miss Hartwell permits work. Your Grace, obey your medical advisor. Clara glanced at Gideon. I am not a physician. You are the nearest authority and terrifying enough to discourage disagreement. The boy laughed, then winced. They spent 4 hours moving lessons into the chapel vestry and inspecting cottages. Gideon listened when Clara showed him mildew beneath a child's mattress and ordered dry straw delivered before sunset. In a kitchen scarcely larger than a wardrobe, a fisherman's widow explained that smoke from a blocked chimney made her daughter faint. Soot blackened Gideon's shoulder when he climbed halfway into the hearth to inspect the flue. You have something on your face, Clara told him outside. Where? Everywhere. He wiped his cheek with the wrong glove, spreading soot into a dark streak. Clara laughed before she could stop herself, startling gulls from the chapel roof. Gideon stared. I fail to see the cause. You look like an unsuccessful chimney sweep. I have been a duke since 19. Failure is rarely reported to me. Then your household has failed you repeatedly. A slow smile reached his eyes. Without the hard line around his mouth, he looked like the man Elias had described, impatient with ceremony, unexpectedly funny, willing to ruin good boots for a useful purpose. The smile vanished when he noticed her looking. We should leave before the bridge floods. They were too late. Brown water had risen over the stone approaches, carrying branches beneath the arch. Gideon left the curricle with the sexton and led Clara toward an older footbridge upstream. Rain clicked against bare branches. Mud pulled at her boots. The bridge consisted of narrow planks over stone piers, with a rope rail darkened by weather. Water rushed beneath it loudly enough to swallow speech. Gideon tested the first board. Wait here. You cannot inspect both ends while standing on one. Clara. Gideon. It was the first time she used his Christian name. Rain clung to his lashes. The third pier may have shifted. Then we cross separately. She stepped onto the bridge. Gideon followed 3 paces behind. Halfway across, a branch struck the pier. The bridge jerked. A plank split beneath Clara's boot, trapping her leg to the knee, and the rope rail tore loose. Gideon caught her coat before the current twisted her sideways. The force drove him to one knee. "Do not move." Spray struck Clara's face. The river roared inches below her boot. "My skirt is caught. I can see that. If you pull, you will tear it. I am prepared to sacrifice the gown." Another branch struck. Gideon wrapped one arm around her middle and tore the trapped wool with his free hand. He lifted her free and carried her the remaining yards. "Put me down," she demanded on the bank. "Your boot is filling with river water." "That is not an answer. It is why I am ignoring the demand." He carried her into an abandoned toll house smelling of wet moss and rotten wood. Rain drummed on the sagging roof. After setting her on a stone bench, he knelt to remove her boot. Blood ran across his bare palm where the rope had cut it. "Your hand. Your leg first." "My leg is bruised. You are dripping blood on my shoe." Clara took clean linen from her pocket. "Give it to me." He surrendered his hand. She washed the shallow cut with rainwater caught in a cup and tied the cloth around his palm. Gideon watched her fingers. When the plank broke, he murmured, "I forgot the promise." Clara stopped over the knot. "What did you remember?" "Nothing fit for a man claiming honorable motives." Outside, the river struck the damaged bridge. Inside, Gideon touched the torn edge of her sleeve, his knuckles brushing her wrist. "Then perhaps your motives are becoming honest," Clara said. His gaze fell to her mouth. The chapel bell began ringing across the flooded fields. Gideon withdrew his hand and stood too quickly. "We must find another road." Clara looked at the linen tied around his palm. "Of course." For 2 weeks, Gideon assigned no servant to follow Clara. He did not stop appearing wherever she worked. He brought roof estimates to the infirmary, accompanied her to inspect cottage bedding, and carried bundles when a wagon wheel sank in mud. At dinner, he asked her opinion before announcing repairs. Their arguments no longer ended with Clara leaving the room. Sometimes Gideon conceded. More often both spoke at once while Lady Miriam ordered another bottle of wine. The abbey changed around them. Closed rooms opened for patience and lessons. Children crossed the southern court with slates beneath their arms. The old refectory became a room where miners' wives learned household accounts. Clara learned Gideon's footsteps, quick when he carried estate news, slower after letters from London, nearly silent when memory drew him toward the tower. He learned her keys, bright chiming when she crossed the hall, a single brass knock when both hands were occupied, and silence when she had left them in a lock and intended to accuse someone else. Their peace ended beneath the wheels of an emerald traveling coach. It carried Gideon's elder sister, Lady Augusta Pembroke, and Lady Celeste Armitage, a marquis's daughter whose beauty had been praised from Bath to Edinburgh. Augusta entered in blue silk and enough orange blossom perfume to reach the stillroom before she did. Celeste followed in pale rose, her gloves unmarked by weather. A female infirmary superintendent. Augusta's voice carried through the corridor. "Living beneath your roof?" "My aunt lives beneath the same roof," Gideon replied. Miriam considers herself exempt from society's rules. Lady Miriam, shelling walnuts beside the fire, did not look up. Society shows excellent judgment. Augusta appeared in the doorway and examined Clara's brown working dress, herb-stained fingers, and powdered apron. "Miss Hartwell, I presume." "Lady Augusta. My brother neglected to mention that you were so young." "Your brother often neglects useful information." Gideon entered behind them, his expression restored to the severe calm Clara had first seen in York. Celeste's gaze settled warmly upon him. "Wycliffe, London would restore you." London usually produces the opposite effect. Augusta inspected the medicine shelves. Are these safe? Not if swallowed indiscriminately, Clara said. You possess a remarkable number of keys. Gideon answered before she could. Because I gave them to her. Augusta's brows rose. At dinner she spoke of royal drawing rooms, bloodlines, dowries, and a rumored understanding between Gideon and Celeste's family. Their estates together would command 40,000 acres, she said. Gideon cut his venison. I own sufficient acres. Land is not the only consideration. Wycliffe requires heirs. Clara reached for her wine. Celeste offered Gideon a graceful smile. Augusta's gaze moved to Clara's stained hands. Charity is admirable when managed with discretion, but a young unmarried woman residing in a bachelor's household invites interpretations no ledger can correct. Lady Miriam's residence satisfies propriety, Gideon said. Its letter, perhaps. Not its imagination. Celeste lowered her eyes. No one questions Miss Hartwell's gratitude. Clara set down her glass. How fortunate. I have expressed very little. Augusta smiled. My concern is for you. A woman in your position may become accustomed to privileges that cannot endure after Gideon marries. Which privileges? Dining with the family. Directing servants. Access to estate funds. Work granted by affection is rarely permanent. Gideon placed his knife beside the plate. The metallic sound silenced the table. Clara's authority was granted because she reopened an infirmary my family neglected, restored a school my steward ignored, and found conditions that cost my tenants lives. No one denies her usefulness, Augusta said. You implied her position depends upon my indulgence. Does it not? Gideon turned to a footman. Send for Mr. Bellamy tomorrow. He will prepare a deed settling £5,000 in government funds for the infirmary's permanent support. Lady Miriam, the rector, and I shall serve as trustees. Miss Hartwell's appointment will not depend upon my marriage, death, or favor. Celeste's smile vanished. Augusta's face reddened. You cannot rearrange family property during dinner. The money is mine to settle. For an apothecary's daughter? For the woman who has done more good with £36 than my steward managed with 3,000. Gideon's voice remained quiet. You will not call her a diversion or dependent. Any insult offered to Miss Hartwell beneath this roof is offered to me. The clock ticked through the silence. Lady Miriam selected a walnut. 5,000 may be insufficient. Clara has expensive opinions. The deed was signed, witnessed, and sealed in the library 3 days later. Augusta and Celeste departed before the wax cooled, taking most of the orange blossom with them. Clara found Gideon that evening in the priory cloister. Moonlight lay across the flagstones, and frost silvered the dead grass. You should not have created the trust because your sister insulted me. I created it because she revealed that I had left your work vulnerable to my decisions. That is nearly an apology. Do not spread the rumor. Water dripped into a cracked stone basin while the sea rolled beyond the walls. Clara folded her arms. Lady Celeste would make an admirable duchess. Celeste believes the lower classes exist to hold doors and admire her complexion. A duke's wife is not selected for her opinion of doors. Mine would be. You require heirs. Augusta announces that whenever conversation threatens to become tolerable. Clara looked toward the frozen grass. You should not allow gratitude toward Elias to determine your life. Is that what you believe happened tonight? You defended his sister. No, Gideon stepped closer, moonlight catching the linen around his injured palm. I defended you. Clara's breath clouded between them. I do not require possession. Protection offered while respecting my choices is another matter. I am attempting to learn the distinction. You learn slowly. You teach without mercy. He brushed a green stain near the base of her thumb. Augusta believed this diminished you. What do you see? Foxglove. That is the substance, not the answer. His composure disappeared. I see evidence that you touched the day instead of allowing it to pass around you. I envy you for it. You could touch your own life. I would not know where to begin. Open a door without deciding what waits beyond it. The compass beneath his waistcoat tapped against a button as he leaned nearer. If I open this particular door, I may not behave wisely. Wisdom has been badly overrated in this house. His mouth almost reached hers when a door banged at the end of the cloister. Mrs. Norwood appeared with a lantern and announced that a patient had arrived. Gideon stepped back, the cold filling the space between them. Clara turned toward the light. Duty calls. Clara. She looked over her shoulder. He stood beneath the arch, one hand closed around the compass. I did not defend Elias's sister. She carried those words through an hour spent binding a fisherman's ankle and into a night when sleep refused to remain. Over the following month, snowmelt filled the ditches and primroses appeared beneath the southern wall. Gideon repaired the western path but did not forbid Clara to use it, he walked it with her when she invited him. They inspected cliff markers, argued about iron railings, and stood above the sea while gulls wheeled below. Together they reopened the Priory Library, sorting chained books beneath windows streaked with rain. One afternoon Clara emerged from a narrow cupboard covered in cobwebs and carrying a 16th-century herbal. Gideon laughed openly. The sound filled the library, warm and astonished, and she had never heard anything so satisfying. Their first kiss came after midnight in the infirmary. A child from Calder's End had developed a fever, and Clara remained beside him until his breathing eased. Gideon arrived carrying tea, bread, and a lamp. He wore shirt-sleeves beneath his waistcoat, his hair fallen across his forehead. Mrs. Norwood said you refused supper. Mrs. Norwood reports my movements with military zeal. I did not ask her. Progress. The child slept behind a curtain. Chamomile steam and clean linen warmed the room while rain cooled on the flagstones. Will he recover? Gideon asked. His fever has lowered. If it remains so until morning, I believe he will. Clara reached for the tea, but fatigue made the cup click against its saucer. Gideon took it before she spilled. You cannot protect anyone if you collapse. Protection is a dangerous word. Then eat because I am asking badly. He broke the bread and handed her half. Their fingers touched and remained together. I thought bringing you here would quiet something, he said. Did it? No. Before you came, the house was silent enough for every regret to speak clearly. Now doors slam, children shout beneath my windows, Mrs. Norwood complains about linen, and my steward threatens resignation twice each week. I hear your keys in corridors that were empty for years. His thumb moved over Clara's knuckle. Nothing is quiet. You sound displeased. I have never been less at peace. He lifted her hand and pressed her stained knuckles against his cheek. I have also never wanted tomorrow so much. Clara's breath caught. Is this the promise speaking? No, the debt. No, then say what is speaking. Gideon drew her to her feet. A man who has spent months trying not to notice the way you enter a room. A man who knows the sound of your keys, the expression you make when an account is dishonest, and how many pins escape your hair after 10. How many? 3. There are 4 tonight. He found the loose pin near her ear and drew it free. A strand fell across her cheek. Then I am losing command. You lost command weeks ago. I know. He bent slowly, leaving her room to turn away. Clara did not. His lips touched hers with careful warmth. She gripped his waistcoat, and his restraint deepened into something hungrier before he stopped, forehead against hers. I should leave. Because a child is sleeping behind the curtain. Because I do not trust myself to remember anything except you. Then remember I did not ask you to stop. Gideon's eyes closed. You depend upon this house. Every choice surrounding you is entangled with something I control. Clara lifted his chin. Then untangle it. Do not pretend distance is virtue because closeness frightens you. He searched her face. What do you want? Kiss me again, then sit beside me until the boy wakes. I am too tired to carry hope and worry alone. Gideon kissed her softly, then drew a chair beside hers. They sat beneath a wool blanket while the lamp burned low. Before dawn, Clara's head settled against his shoulder. Gideon held her hand until pale light entered the eastern windows. For 3 days happiness moved through Wycliffe Abbey quietly enough to resemble ordinary life. Gideon breakfasted with Clara and Lady Miriam. He visited the infirmary without inspecting the locks. Clara walked the western path alone and found no rider on the ridge. At dinner, his knee touched hers beneath the table and remained there. In the library, he kissed her beside open windows while sea air scattered account papers across the carpet. Then a London newspaper arrived. Beneath the society notices, a paragraph described the Duke of Wycliffe's unusual attachment to a provincial apothecary's daughter, and suggested Lady Celeste had withdrawn from a rumored understanding compromised by domestic influence of an intimate character. The page smelled of damp ink. Gideon stood at the window, fully dressed for travel although no journey had been discussed. Augusta, Clara said. Possibly. It no longer matters. A carriage will take you to Bath tomorrow. Clara placed the newspaper on the table. Why? The cottage is prepared. Lady Miriam will accompany you. The infirmary trust will continue, and you may direct its accounts until another superintendent is trained. You intend to remove me from my work because a newspaper printed a sentence. I intend to preserve your reputation. By sending me away. By placing you beyond my influence. Morning light reflected from the sea and filled the windows with hard white glare. Look at me, Clara said. He did not. What happened in the infirmary cannot happen again. It happened twice afterward. I behaved selfishly. You behaved honestly. Gideon turned at last, sleeplessness shadowing his eyes. I kissed a woman whose debts I paid, whose position I created, and whose brother entrusted her safety to me. Any desire you expressed may have been shaped by gratitude, dependence, grief, or the fact that I control the roof above you. You asked what I wanted. I should never have placed you where answering carried risk. So you have answered for me instead. His fingers closed around Elias's compass. He asked me to protect you from men who might exploit your circumstances. I have become the man with the greatest power to do so. Therefore you will send me 200 miles away. You will have a house, independent funds, and Lady Miriam's companionship. Except I did not choose the house, departure, or destination. Society will believe you traded affection for patronage. It is my name. I will not allow, there. Clara stepped closer. You will not allow. You will decide and arrange, then call the sound of the key protection. What I want has nothing to do with what is right. That sentence is the refuge of cowards. You think love becomes noble when you refuse it. You are not protecting me from exploitation. You are protecting yourself from the possibility that Elias wanted you to live. Do not speak for him. Then stop speaking for me. Clara removed the infirmary keys and placed them on the newspaper. I will leave because I will not remain where my freedom depends upon whether you fear your own heart. I will not take your cottage or allowance. The trust belongs to the infirmary. I shall find work elsewhere. You cannot travel alone. Watch me. She walked out while the brass keys trembled against the porcelain plate. Clara packed Elias's medicine chest that afternoon. Bottles settled into wool with soft clinks while the sea struck the cliffs below. When she lifted the final tray, one corner caught. Beneath it lay a false panel containing a sealed letter and a small iron key. Gideon's name crossed the paper in Elias's hand. The medicinal scent of camphor and rosemary rose around Clara as she sat back on her heels. Elias had prepared the letter before leaving York, intending it to be found only if he failed to return. Clara carried it to the tower, but Gideon was gone. His leather book remained on the map table beside instructions for her journey, for outriders, reserved rooms, fresh horses, a medical man warned of her arrival, and every bridge examined. He had arranged her exile with the same care as her captivity. At dusk she found him at the eastern gate. A traveling carriage waited beyond the arch, lamps glowing through mist. For mounted men checked pistols while Gideon issued instructions with the great gate key in his hand. "Dismiss them," Clara said. Gideon saw the book and letter. "Wait beyond the wall," he told the riders. When they had gone, he asked, "Where did you find that?" "Inside Elias's chest. It was sealed." "You never read it." "I never knew it existed." Clara held it out, but he did not take it. "Open it." "No, you built my future around a dying request, yet refuse his actual words." His fingers tightened around the key. "Open it yourself." Clara broke the wax. Elias's writing began firmly and weakened toward the final lines. "Gideon," she read, "if this reaches you, matters have gone badly. Clara will insist she requires no help. In most respects she will be correct. She requires work worthy of her mind, money she has earned, and freedom to refuse every arrangement made for her benefit." Gideon closed his eyes. "You will be tempted to make her safety a duty because duty is easier for you than affection. Do not turn her into an account you can settle. Protect her from hunger, coercion, and any man who would choose her life without asking. That instruction includes you." Wind lifted the paper. A carriage horse stamped beyond the gate. Clara continued. "Stand beside her when she asks. Stand aside when she does not. If she makes you laugh, do not pretend it means nothing. You have denied yourself every harmless pleasure since your father died. Live well enough that I may resent missing it. One last warning, Clara hates locked gates." Gideon released the key. It struck stone with a heavy clang. "I failed him." "Yes. You ignored his warning, and Elias paid part of the price. But you cannot change that letter. You can decide whether future acts serve the living or punish the dead." Clara placed the leather book in his hands. This served neither. He opened pages filled with roads, tides, guards, and disasters. "I did not know how else to keep the promise. You could have asked me. And if you refused, then you would possess an answer." He looked toward the road. "Do you still intend to leave?" "Yes." Pain crossed his face, but he nodded. Gideon picked up the gate key, fitted it into the lock, and turned until the ancient bolt withdrew with a grinding sound. He pushed the gate fully open. "The carriage is yours. The outriders go only if you request them. Choose Bath, York, London, or anywhere else. No allowance will be forced upon you." His voice roughened. "You are free of me. Is that what you want?" "What I want cannot close the gate again." "That was not my question." Mist clung to the scar beneath his jaw. "No. I do not want you to leave." "Why?" Gideon carried the book into the guardroom, drew a line through every instruction written without Clara's knowledge, and signed beneath each cancellation. Ink scratched across paper. "Because I listen for your keys before I open my eyes. Because every room changes when you enter it. Because you stand in ruined schools and neglected wards as though the world can be repaired by beginning with the next useful act. I believed peace meant feeling nothing, and you made that emptiness unbearable." He crossed the threshold, leaving the estate behind him. "I love you. Not as Elias's sister, not as a debt, and not as proof of my honor. I love your stained hands, impossible accounts, temper, courage, and every door you open." Tears cooled along Clara's lashes. "You are still arranging matters. Then arrange them yourself. Gideon lowered himself to one knee in the wet road, holding no ring, money, contract, or key. Choose the work, house, destination, and whether my name ever becomes yours. Tell me only whether there is any life you would freely choose that permits me to stand beside you. Clara looked at the waiting carriage. The gate was open. She could leave. She walked past Gideon, opened the carriage door, removed the traveling case Mrs. Norwood had packed, and carried it back through the arch. The infirmary remains independent, she said. Gideon rose slowly. Entirely. No servants follow me unless requested. No reports concerning my headaches, appetite, or sneezing. The western gate stays unlocked by daylight. You will fund the school, repair the miners' chimneys, and permit me an assistant. Agreed. And you will ask again when you possess a ring and your knee is not sinking into a public road. His breath stopped. What answer should I expect? A free one. Clara caught his coat and kissed him beneath the open gate. After one stunned heartbeat, Gideon's arms closed around her, not as a guard securing a charge, but as a man receiving what he could not command. Was that the answer? He whispered. That was encouragement to purchase a ring. I own family rings. Purchase one not inherited from a woman who married for land. Gideon laughed, the sound rolling through the gatehouse and across the wet road. This time he did not silence it. Spring reached Wycliffe 6 weeks later. Primroses brightened the cliff path, lambs called from the lower fields, and open windows carried sea salt, lime wash, and bread from the abbey kitchens. The village church overflowed for the wedding. Miners stood beside fishermen, children from Calder's End crowded the rear pews. Lady Miriam wore violet and informed Augusta that orange blossom had been forbidden by medical authority. Clara walked down the aisle in deep blue silk, Elias's compass tied around her wrist. Gideon waited at the chancel, solemn until she reached him. I thought you disliked what it became, he murmured. Clara opened the lid. Beneath the needle, a new inscription read, Stand beside me. A reminder, she said. For which of us? Both. Their marriage did not close Clara's doors. The infirmary hired 2 assistants, the school received its slate roof, miners' chimneys were repaired, and the priory library opened 3 evenings each week. Gideon attended every trustees' meeting and lost most arguments concerning expense. He learned to ask before ordering an escort. Clara learned that refusing help merely because he offered it could become another form of pride. On the first anniversary of Elias's death, they placed rosemary beside his stone above the sea. Back at the abbey, the infirmary bell rang. Clara quickened her step. Gideon reached the door first and touched the iron latch. Locked? She asked. He turned the key, releasing lamplight, voices, and rosemary into the dusk. Open, he said. Clara crossed the threshold first, and Gideon followed her into the light.